basic reason for the concern has been expressed succinctly by an American general, General Lee Butler. He's the former head of the U.S. Strategic Command, which is in charge of nuclear weapons, strategic policies involving nuclear weapons. He writes that it is dangerous in the extreme that in the cauldron of animosities that we call the Middle East, one nation should arm itself with nuclear weapons, which may inspire other nations to do so. General Butler, however, was not referring to Iran. He was referring to Israel. That's the country that ranks highest in polls of European public opinion as the most dangerous country in the world, right above Iran. And not in the Arab world. In the Arab world, the public regards the United States as the second most dangerous country after Israel. That goes back quite a while. Iran is generally disliked, but it ranks far lower as a threat among populations, that is, not the dictatorships. Western media and commentary keep almost entirely to the views of the dictators. So we constantly hear that the Arabs want decisive U.S. action against Iran, which is true of the dictators. You may recall that a while ago WikiLeaks released the diplomatic documents quoting Arab dictators, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, as calling for strong U.S. action against Iran. The commentary about that was interesting. It was almost euphoric. Isn't this wonderful? The Arabs support U.S. policy against Iran, which is true of the Arab dictators. At the very same time, Western polls were coming out, Western-run polls, showing that it's quite the opposite. That though, again, they don't like Iran, they're not regarded as a threat. The United States is regarded as a threat. And in fact, opposition to U.S. policy was so strong that a majority in some countries like Egypt, a substantial majority, thought that the region would be more secure if Iran had nuclear weapons. They don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons, but if the United States and Israel have them and are there, that's what's needed. That was almost never mentioned. And that reaction is pretty striking. It illustrates the contempt for democracy among Western elite opinion. Doesn't matter what the population thinks. That's derided as the Arab street. Who cares what they think? But what matters is what the dictators think. It's a commentary about us, not about the Arab world. Well, unlike Iran, Israel refuses to allow inspections, refuses to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has hundreds of nuclear weapons and advanced delivery systems. It also has a long record of violence and repression. It has annexed and settled conquered territories illegally in violation of Security Council orders, report decisions, and many acts of aggression. It's invaded Lebanon 5 times with no credible pretext and much more. Meanwhile, severe threats of attack continue from the United States and particularly Israel. Daily there are strong threats of attack, and there's a reaction from the U.S. government. The Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, reacted to threats from Israel by saying, we don't want them to attack Iran, but they're a sovereign country. They can do what they like. I mean, if Iran was making comparable threats about Israel, and it isn't, the reaction would be quite different. If some of you have antiquarian interests, You may remember that there's a document called the United Nations Charter. The key provision in the UN Charter is a ban against the threat or use of force in international affairs. There are two rogue states, the United States and Israel, that pay no attention to this and are constantly issuing severe threats, and the European Union goes along politely. And the threats are not just words. There is an ongoing war, or at least what we would regard as an ongoing war if it was directed against us. There are regular assassinations of scientists, terrorist acts. There's a very severe economic war. U.S. threats, which are unilateral, have cut Iran out of the international financial system. European countries don't disobey the United States, so they've gone along. Five high-level former NATO commanders have recently released what they called a new grand strategy, which identified various acts of war that justify a violent response. One of them is weapons of finance. That's an act of war that justifies a military reaction when it's directed against us. But cutting Iran out of global financial markets is different. The U.S. government is very proudly announcing that it's undertaking extensive cyber warfare against Iran. The Pentagon has identified cyber warfare as a serious military attack which justifies our military response. But that's the difference between what we do to them and what they do to us. Israel has an enormous lethal armory, not just nuclear. Only recently, in the last few months, Israel has received advanced submarines provided by Germany. These are capable of carrying Israel's nuclear-tipped missiles, and they're sure to be deployed in the Persian Gulf or nearby. They may already be there, certainly if Israel proceeds with its plan to bomb Iran. And the U.S., of course, has a vast array of nuclear weapons surrounding the region, from the Indian Ocean all the way to the west.